pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. And now here comes another one that I feel like not many of you are gonna like, or maybe not many of you like in general. But you know what? This might as well be talked about because I myself pretty much failed to catch a good opportunity to talk about something this ambitious. And while a lot of people might like it as a sequel, a lot of us hardcore Pixar fans see it as something much different than what we probably would have anticipated. The long-awaited sequel to The Incredibles, just simply called The Incredibles 2. Released in June 2018, not long after my 19th birthday, but also my graduation in high school, and also my eventual return to YouTube after the blackout period had subsequently come to an end. Yeah, that was a pretty busy time in my life, but June 2018 was also pretty busy for a variety of other reasons. But in terms of The Incredibles 2's release, I really have to say, as a hardcore Pixar film fan out there, I have not necessarily expected too much to take place. There were so many original projects that had come by since the first 10 years of Pixar had pretty much shown us a lot of unique masterpieces that were not like many other films of that time and age. It all began in '95 with Toy Story, in which development happened as early as 1990. Yeah, it took quite a while to make. The end result was a big success, by any means. It's still one of the best movies I myself have ever seen in history. And there are a lot of others out there that seem to compete or actually happen to be even better in most ways. And then there came the sequel in '99, but in between there were a few other things that had taken place pretty much, including a few Pixar shorts like Jerry's Game, and then of course there were all the bumpers that had taken place throughout those years up until Toy Story 2's slated release in November 1999, and then following that we would get a variety of other original projects out there, not sequels, so to speak, like A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and then The Incredibles in 2004. In 2005 and onwards, it was quite a bit of a leap in terms of how Pixar's progress had come by from not being so good, yet very impressive at the same time back in the 90s, up until this point where Pixar is still a multi-billion-dollar company that has made multi-million-dollar films that happen to gross multi-billion-dollar box office rates. And to this day, we are still getting a lot of Pixar films here and there, but the thing is, the majority of Pixar's films in the 2010s and up until this point here in the 2020s, where we're now going to be having ourselves another new project that'll be coming soon this November, mostly original projects were coming around. Such films out there like WALL-E, Up, and then eventually we would also get ourselves some films like The Good Dinosaur, Coco, which was not necessarily as successful as most of the others. And then more recently, we got ourselves films like Soul and Onwards. But now that we're getting ourselves a few other unique Pixar films out there, new projects that are pretty much all original by this point, it's still worth noting that maybe Pixar is probably going to have some considerations in terms of creating new sequels for certain things. But then again, thanks to certain things out there like Disney Plus, giving us a bunch of all new original projects that Pixar themselves has worked on for a while now, we're actually going to be getting ourselves another new adaptation to that of Monsters, Inc. called Monsters at Work. But until then, we're probably going to be expecting some other all-original projects all around. But anyways, back to The Incredibles 2. This serves as a straight-up sequel to the first Incredibles, which was released all the way back in 2004. 14 years before the sequel's release, but most importantly, there were a lot of other things that had taken place after The Incredibles' release date, including some video games, like The Incredibles video game, which was released on PS2, and then of course there was also a video game which also kind of acts as a straight-up sequel called Rise of the Underminer, which was released on the PS2 in 2005, along with a few other console ports that had taken place. So the thing is, how does The Incredibles 2 basically take place? If you guessed with the Underminer, like it was at the end of The Incredibles 1, then you'd pretty much be right. But let me tell you, Rise of the Underminer pretty much set the bar a bit high at first, but then gave us the kind of feeling that we would normally expect to basically find out what would a second Incredibles movie be like. And guess what? There is nothing like that ever happened in the official release of the second Incredibles movie 14 years after the first film and 13 years after Rise of the Underminer was released on home consoles. So the thing is, The Incredibles 2 didn't even do anything related to Rise of the Underminer. So at this point, I feel like that it's probably worth noting that Rise of the Underminer should be considered as maybe Incredibles 1.5. But wait, the Underminer does not even have some of the same things that happened inside of the game. It basically just does everything differently in terms of the battle with the Underminer during the opening scene of the second film itself. So, right off the bat, that was sort of a disappointment, especially for hardcore Pixar fans like myself. Again, us hardcore fans usually have the bar set much higher than usual, and our expectations are normally a lot higher than they are with typical fans who are not necessarily very well known with some of these things. So again, there's really a lot of things going for it, but in terms of The Incredibles 2, otherwise, I'd say that the film itself has a nice chemistry that most other Pixar films at the time did not necessarily offer. Of course, they brought back the same exact cast out there with Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, and Miles Fox, along with various other voices here and there. But we would also get to know about some other voice actors here and there, and not to mention many different characters that they themselves would become a part of, in a way. So The Incredibles 2 right off the bat gives us the same old feel that we would normally expect from the first movie, and it basically gives us a whole new look at how the superheroes basically evolve into one another. But the thing is, in terms of how the plot goes, like I said, the opening scene with the Underminer was a total disappointment. They took nothing from the video game and acted like the video game was not even a thing. Well, I suppose I should probably end it at that, but you know what? I'm that hardcore of a fan, so let's go ahead and just talk a bit more about it. So, anyways, the plot goes as far as to giving us the same old things out there that we heard from the first film, like the fact that superheroes were made illegal, especially after what happened when Mr. Incredible tried to save someone who tried to commit suicide by jumping off a high-rise building. And then, of course, there's that point in time where we end up seeing a lot of connectivity with Edna Mode, who was, of course, voiced by Brad Bird, whom we remember for pretty much doing a lot of projects out there, including involvement with The Simpsons and Family Guy, as well as assistance in development of the production of The Iron Giant in 1999. Brad Bird was basically one of a few unique individuals out there who had the creative talent to do a lot of things. Bird basically gave us the first Incredibles film in 2004, 5 years after The Iron Giant was released. And then, of course, well, guess what? Brad Bird was also the voice actor for that of Edna Mode, and actually comes back in the sequel to reprise that same old role. But how do we see it compared to the first movie? Well, in terms of Edna Mode's performance, let's just say it's a bit bleak. It's almost like someone different is behind the controls. Well, then again, this sequel came out 14 years after the first one, so maybe I'll go ahead and cut some slack on it a little bit. We even get to have Samuel L. Jackson reprise the role of Frozone, whom, of course, is the friend to Mr. Incredible, and sometimes the assistant in the heroic work that basically develops. Here in the sequel, compared to the first film, we get to see a lot of new character development. Like Dash pretty much trying to learn how to do math, and then of course with that famous meme where Mr. Incredible goes, "Math is math." I tell ya, I kind of cracked up at that. Because who would have thought that something like that, which is still true to this very day, would ever get highlighted in a film that's all about action and adventure? I mean, that's a pretty nice way to pretty much break the third wall, the line between reality and fiction. I guess they had to do it at some point, because after all, even in the first movie, we got to see a lot of action like that, development with the characters in terms of how real life things take place, such as school and work, pretty much. We all know what happens when, well, Mr. Incredible basically did not do so well at the job as an insurance agent, but here in the sequel, where Mr. Incredible, of course, is still fired after what happened to, well, the boss from the first movie, Mr. Incredible ends up being given an opportunity to basically be relocated to a fancy house with a bunch of nice, unique presences that are not normally given to a lot of people. And it's all because of the fact that the family has superpowers. As obvious as that sounds, I don't really know how sensical that seems to be, but then again, they are being relocated for their own safety, so I kind of just went along for the ride. Went with the flow. But in terms of the rest of the plot, it basically goes like this. You have an evil mastermind who is attempting to put the Incredibles out of commission, and the rest of the superhero brethren that is still around to this day. And this evil mastermind is at first believed to be someone who was a bit puny in most ways, but actually turns out to be a pawn. Someone who ends up taking the blame rather than the real suspect, who turns out to be, well, a relative to that of the person who is in fact trying to save the Incredibles from doom by having them relocated. On top of this, we would also be able to see a lot of new things take place, including Jack Jack. Yeah, that's right. This is the same old baby who can become bulletproof, be immune to flames over thousands of degrees, and of course turn into some sort of gigantic monster. But we would of course be able to see a lot of other things take place. Laser vision, shape-shifting, and even telekinesis in a way. Also the ability to become intangible, making Jack Jack go through walls with ease. Like they're nothing at all. So, if there was a lot that we basically have learned from the Jack Jack short that came around the same time as Rise of the Underminer and all other Incredibles related media that was released in 2005, then well, that's just pretty much what that's about. Jack Jack's character development is staggering. It goes to the point where this baby is able to take on a raccoon that is outside of the house. And let me tell you, that fight with the raccoon alone is unbelievable. It is just, it's crazy. Well, then again, Jack Jack is a superhero who is still a freaking newborn. And as Violet said, is not even toilet trained. Maybe that is still true. But you know what? Once a superhero, always a superhero. So. But in the end, in terms of how the plot basically goes ahead and gives us the nice old conclusion to that of the sequel that has been long awaited for over a decade, the real villain is captured and is therefore defeated. Peace and harmony has been restored. And finally, well, the laws that prohibited superheroic actions had been lifted. What an amazing ending! Yeah! Superheroes are now legal again! Yeah! What a nice way to close off the story of that. I guess that probably means we won't be getting an Incredibles 3. Well, then again, Pixar has done a lot of things. They made a third Toy Story back in 2005, but then had it delayed all the way to 2010 because of the closure of Circle 7 Animations. And then, of course, they tried to create a direct sequel to Monsters, Inc., but again, that along with a bunch of other projects, sequels and like, all had to be canceled because of that exact problem. However, we have managed to get ourselves some other sequels, prequels, reboots, and etc. to most of these franchises that have been around since day one. And looking at it now, well, I don't really see a reason why you cannot have a third Incredibles film out there. Because after all, if we're going to be getting ourselves yet another Ghostbusters film, as well as another, well, it's already released, but we actually got ourselves another new Conjuring sequel called The Devil Made Me Do It. So, I don't see any reason why we can't have another Incredibles sequel by any means. So, with that in mind, in terms of giving this one a score, well, I guess a solid 7.0. Again, it's no masterpiece. I feel like that the bar was set a little high when it came time to at least development of the sequel itself. The bar was set a bit high, expectations were also a bit high, and for us hardcore Pixar fans, that's okay, because normally when we have a sequel going on to an already good masterpiece in the Pixar universe, why would you want to make a sequel to it? I don't necessarily see any reason why, or any logistics as to how you could basically put a sequel together, but then again, with all the things that have taken place, like all the Problem Child sequels, all of the Scream sequels, all of the Free Willy sequels, the Jaws sequels, as well as the Psycho sequels, and from pretty much then on, we would be able to have ourselves enormous series of all sorts. Dracula, and the Transformers Michael Bay verse. I tell you, the list goes on and on when it comes to making sequels, reboots, prequels, and all that. Show adaptations, animated stuff, live action animated hybrid stuff. Again, the list goes on with that kind of stuff. It's safe to say that most cinematic universes as we know it are finally going to be coming together. Because after all, the one that we just had earlier in 2021 actually turns out to be quite a success. So it's no surprise that we're going to be expecting a sequel to come by soon enough. So anyways, The Incredibles 2, 7.0. 14 years after the original, but still, it's entertaining if you look past a lot of things out there that sort of hurt the overall experience. Beyond all that, I'd still consider it watchable. For any reason. So, well, I'd say now we're doing pretty good here. But expect some more content to come around pretty soon. And if you want to see more, go down to my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.